I faked being unconscious after my car accident to hear what my family really thought, and it changed everything. The crash happened on Highway 9, just outside town. Some drunk driver ran a red light and T-boned my Honda at 60 miles per hour. I remember the sickening crunch of metal, the sound of glass exploding like fireworks. Then nothing until I woke up in the hospital with machines beeping around me like an electronic symphony. I wasn't seriously hurt. Minor concussion, some bruising, a few stitches on my forehead. Nothing life-threatening, according to the nurses. But when I heard familiar voices arguing in the hallway outside my room, something deep in my gut told me to keep my eyes closed and listen. How long until she wakes up? That was Dad's voice, strained and tired. Could be any time now, the doctor replied professionally. She's stable, very lucky, considering the severity of the impact. Head injuries are unpredictable, but her scans look good. Then I heard Mom's distinctive heels clicking against the linoleum as she entered the room. Dad followed, along with my older brother Trevor. I could smell Mom's expensive perfume mixed with the antiseptic hospital smell. Well, Mom said, her voice unusually cold and businesslike. At least now we know the truth. Know what? Trevor asked, confusion evident in his tone. Dad cleared his throat nervously. About the will. Your grandmother's will? My blood went cold. What will? Grandma Ruth had died just last month, and while I knew there'd been some family meetings about her estate, no one had mentioned anything about a will specifically naming me. Your grandmother left everything to Cassie, Mom continued, and I could hear the bitterness creeping into her voice. The house, the investments, the life insurance, all of it. We found the papers in her safe deposit box yesterday when the lawyer finally let us in. I'd been wondering why they seemed so secretive and concerned about Grandma Ruth's estate since her funeral. She'd always been closest to me. We'd spent every Saturday together for years, baking cookies and talking about books. But I had no idea she'd left me anything significant. How much are we talking about? Trevor's voice was sharp, calculating. $800,000, Dad said quietly, like he was afraid someone might overhear. Plus the Victorian house on Maple Street with all the antiques. The lawyer estimated the total value at over $1 million. The room went silent except for my heart monitor, which seemed to be beeping faster. I fought to keep my breathing steady and my face relaxed. She's 18, Mom finally said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. Legally, it's all hers the moment she turns conscious and signs the papers. No waiting period, no restrictions. Unless she can't sign them, Trevor said slowly, and something in his tone made my stomach clench. Another pause. This one felt dangerous. What exactly are you suggesting? Dad asked, his voice barely audible. I'm saying accidents happen, Trevor replied, and I could practically hear the wheels turning in his head. Head injuries can cause permanent damage, memory loss, cognitive impairment, inability to make sound financial decisions. Mom's voice dropped to barely a whisper. The doctor mentioned she might have some confusion when she wakes up. That's normal with concussions. Exactly, Trevor said, warming to his theme. And confused people make poor decisions. They need family to help them navigate complex legal matters. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own family, the people who'd raised me, who I'd trusted completely, were discussing how to steal my inheritance while I lay supposedly unconscious in a hospital bed. We could have her declared incompetent, Dad said thoughtfully, his business mind clearly working. Temporarily, of course, just until she's fully recovered and thinking clearly. Which could be months, Mom added quickly. Maybe years, depending on the severity of her cognitive issues. And in the meantime, someone would need to manage her affairs, Trevor finished, satisfaction creeping into his voice. Someone who cares about her best interests. The machines around me continued their steady beeping. I focused every ounce of willpower on keeping my breathing even, my face completely relaxed. One twitch, one change in my heart rate, and they'd know I was awake. It's not like we'd be stealing from her, Mom rationalized, and I could practically hear her convincing herself. We'd be protecting her. She's too young for that kind of responsibility. Look what happened to the Peterson girl. Inherited money at 19 and blew it all on drugs and bad boyfriends. Besides, Dad said, his voice growing stronger, Ruth should have left the money to us anyway. We're the ones who took care of her for years. We visited every week, handled her doctor appointments, managed her prescriptions when she got forgetful. Cassie just showed up for cookies and stories, Trevor added bitterly. But somehow she's the favorite grandchild. I remembered those Saturday afternoons completely differently. While they'd been busy with their own lives, I'd been the one who noticed when Grandma Ruth started repeating herself. I'd been the one who gently suggested she stop driving at night. I'd been the one who held her hand during chemo treatments when the rest of the family was mysteriously busy with work emergencies and prior commitments. Those Saturday visits weren't just about cookies and stories. Grandma Ruth had been teaching me about life, about money management, about trusting my instincts. She'd shown me her investment portfolio, explained how compound interest worked, discussed the importance of having financial independence. She talked about the family business that Dad had run into the ground, the multiple loans they'd asked her for over the years, the way they'd started treating her like a bank instead of a beloved mother and grandmother. The important thing is moving quickly, Mom said, her voice becoming more businesslike, before she fully recovers and starts asking difficult questions. I already researched the legal requirements, Trevor said, and the pride in his voice made me sick. We need medical documentation of cognitive impairment, testimony from family members about her inability to make sound decisions, and a court petition filed within 30 days of the incident that caused the incapacity. Dr. Harrison went to high school with me, Mom added. I could talk to him about emphasizing the confusion and memory issues in his medical reports. Perfect, Dad said. And I'll handle the financial side. Set up a conservatorship account, get the legal paperwork started, maybe even look into investment opportunities that could benefit the whole family. They continued planning for another hour, their voices occasionally dropping so low I had to strain to hear. Trevor would research conservatorship laws and find a lawyer who specialized in quick proceedings. Mom would work on Dr. Harrison and document every sign of confusion I showed. Dad would locate all of Grandma Ruth's assets and prepare to transfer them into a family-controlled conservatorship account. When she wakes up, we need to be extremely careful about what we say and how we present information, Mom warned. Document everything. Any confusion, any memory problems, any signs that she's not thinking clearly or making rational decisions. I'll start recording our conversations with her from day one, Trevor added. Build a comprehensive case for the court showing that she needs protection. And remember, Dad said, his voice taking on that authoritative tone he used in failed business meetings, we're doing this for her own good. She'll thank us someday when she's older and wiser and realizes how much trouble we saved her. The casual way they discussed destroying my life and stealing my future was breathtaking. They'd already convinced themselves that robbing me was somehow a noble act of protection. After they finally left, I lay there in the darkness processing what I'd learned. These people, who'd sung me lullabies and helped with homework and celebrated every birthday and graduation, were planning to rob me blind. Worse than that, they were going to use my supposed brain injury as the weapon to accomplish their theft. But they'd made one critical mistake in all their scheming. They assumed I was actually confused and vulnerable. I wasn't. In fact, lying there listening to their betrayal, I'd never been thinking more clearly in my life. The next morning, I decided to play their game better than they could ever imagine. When Dr. Harrison came in for his morning rounds, I pretended to wake up slowly, blinking in apparent confusion at the bright fluorescent lights. "Where am I?" I asked, making my voice sound weak and uncertain. "You're in St. Mary's Hospital, sweetie," he said gently, his voice taking on that overly patient tone doctors use with confused patients. "You were in a serious car accident 2 days ago. Do you remember anything about what happened?" I stared at him blankly, letting my eyes lose focus slightly. "Car accident? No, I don't remember anything. My head hurts so much it's hard to think." He made detailed notes on his clipboard, exactly the kind of medical documentation my family was hoping for. Within minutes of Dr. Harrison leaving, my family arrived like vultures circling wounded prey. Mom rushed to my bedside with tears in her eyes. Quite the Oscar-worthy performance. "Oh, honey, we were so worried about you," she said, squeezing my hand with just the right amount of maternal concern. "We've been here every day waiting for you to wake up." "Mom?" I made my voice uncertain, like I was struggling to place her face. "What happened to me? Why can't I remember anything?" Trevor moved closer, his phone already recording discreetly from his jacket pocket. "You don't remember the accident at all?" I shook my head slowly, then winced dramatically as if the movement caused severe pain. "Everything's so fuzzy and strange. I can barely remember yesterday. Or was it yesterday? What day is it now?" Dr. Harrison returned and launched into a detailed explanation about potential memory issues from head trauma, using medical terms that I pretended not to understand. Mom and Dad exchanged meaningful glances while maintaining perfect expressions of parental concern. "The important thing is that you're alive and safe," Dad said, patting my shoulder with false tenderness. "Everything else can wait until you're feeling completely better." But I could see the cold calculation in his eyes, the wheels turning as he processed exactly how to use my apparent confusion to his maximum advantage. Over the next few days, I gave the performance of my lifetime. I forgot conversations we'd had minutes earlier, acting confused when they reminded me of things we'd just discussed. I got confused about simple things: what I'd eaten for breakfast, what year it was, why I was in the hospital, whether I'd already taken my medication. I acted completely overwhelmed whenever they mentioned anything involving paperwork, legal documents, or financial decisions. "There are some important things we need to discuss about your grandmother's estate," Mom said carefully on the third day, watching my reaction like a scientist studying lab results. "Grandma Ruth?" I said, my voice small and confused. Is she okay? I feel like something bad happened, but I can't remember what." "She passed away last month, sweetheart," Dad said gently, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "You were at the funeral, remember? You gave a beautiful speech about all those Saturday afternoons you spent together." I shook my head, tears filling my eyes, real ones this time, because thinking about Grandma Ruth's death and funeral still caused genuine pain. "I don't remember any of that. Why can't I remember such an important thing?" "It's perfectly normal," Trevor said, his voice soothing while his phone continued recording my emotional breakdown. "The doctors explained that memory problems are completely expected after head injuries. Don't worry about anything complicated right now. But there are some papers that need to be signed," Mom added delicately. "Important legal things related to Grandma Ruth's estate. Nothing for you to worry about understanding. We can handle all the complicated financial and legal stuff." "It's too much," I said, pressing my hands to my temples in apparent distress. "I can't think straight about anything. Everything feels overwhelming and confusing." "Don't worry about any of it," Mom soothed, stroking my hair like I was a sick child. "We'll take care of everything until you're completely better. That's what family is for." Trevor filmed my entire emotional breakdown, building his legal evidence case with every tear and confused question. Mr. Peterson, Grandma Ruth's longtime attorney, came to see me on Thursday afternoon. He'd been handling her legal affairs for over 2 decades and needed my signature on various estate documents to finalize the inheritance transfer. I'd known him since I was a little girl. He'd always given me peppermints when Mom brought me to his office for various legal appointments. "Hello, Cassie," he said warmly, settling into the uncomfortable chair beside my hospital bed. I'm so sorry we're meeting under these unfortunate circumstances. How are you feeling? Confused about everything, I admitted, letting my voice sound small and uncertain. Everyone keeps talking about papers and legal things and money, but I don't understand any of it. Mr. Peterson pulled out a thick folder and began methodically explaining Grandma Ruth's will, the substantial cash inheritance, the valuable Victorian house, the diversified investment portfolio. My family watched my reaction like hawks, ready to pounce on any sign of confusion or inability to comprehend complex financial information. That's so much money, I said, looking at the numbers with apparent bewilderment and fear. I'm just 18 years old. I don't know anything about managing money or investments or owning property. What am I supposed to do with a whole house? Perhaps? Mom interjected carefully, her voice full of false concern. It would be better if someone more experienced and financially savvy handled these complicated matters until Cassie is fully recovered. Mr. Peterson frowned deeply, his bushy eyebrows drawing together. Are you suggesting some kind of formal guardianship or conservatorship arrangement? Just temporarily. Dad jumped in quickly, his business voice smooth and reasonable. Until she's thinking clearly again and can make informed decisions. We don't want her to make any choices she might regret later when her mind is clearer. The doctor said her confusion and memory problems could last for months, Trevor added helpfully, still recording everything. Maybe even longer, depending on how her brain heals from the trauma. But Mr. Peterson wasn't buying their carefully rehearsed act as easily as Dr. Harrison had. He'd known me since I was little, had watched me grow up into an intelligent and capable young woman, knew exactly how sharp and perceptive I'd always been. I'd like to speak with Cassie privately for a few minutes, he said firmly. My family protested immediately and loudly. What if I got confused or upset without them there for support? What if I had another memory episode? Shouldn't family members be present for important legal discussions involving someone with cognitive impairment? But Mr. Peterson insisted with the quiet authority of someone who'd spent decades dealing with difficult families, and his tone brooked no argument. After they reluctantly filed out of the room, shooting worried glances back at me, he pulled his chair closer to my bed. Your grandmother was a very wise and perceptive woman, he said quietly, studying my face intently with sharp eyes. My stomach dropped. Did he know I was faking? Had I made some mistake in my performance? What do you mean? He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a sealed envelope with my name written on it in Grandma Ruth's distinctive, elegant handwriting. She specifically mentioned this exact possibility in our last meeting before she passed away. What possibility? I asked, dropping some of my confused act despite myself. That your family might try to interfere with your inheritance through legal manipulation, he said bluntly, watching my reaction carefully. She was growing increasingly concerned about their financial situation and their sudden interest in her estate planning. He handed me the envelope with steady hands. Inside was a letter that made my heart race and my hands shake. My dearest Cassie, if Mr. Peterson is giving you this letter, it means your parents and brother have shown their true colors regarding your inheritance. I'm not surprised, though it breaks my heart into pieces. They've been dropping increasingly obvious hints for months about how young people can't handle money responsibly, how tragic it would be if someone made poor financial choices with a large inheritance, how important it is to have family guidance for major decisions. I've been testing them, dear one, asking their opinions about various scenarios, and they've failed every single test. The money is yours because you're the only person in our entire family who never asked me for it, never hinted that you deserved it, never made me feel like a walking ATM machine. You visited me because you genuinely loved spending time with me, not because you wanted something from me. You're the only one who noticed when I started getting forgetful, the only one who made sure I was eating properly, the only one who held my hand during those awful chemotherapy sessions. Don't let them take what's rightfully yours through manipulation or legal trickery. Trust Mr. Peterson completely. He has very specific instructions to protect your interests and ensure your inheritance reaches you safely. All my love and faith in you, Grandma Ruth. Tears filled my eyes, real ones this time. As I finished reading her final message to me, Mr. Peterson leaned forward, his voice gentle but deadly serious. She also set up an extremely sophisticated trust structure that makes conservatorship virtually impossible without clear, documented evidence of permanent mental incapacity. And she recorded a detailed video testimony specifically documenting your mental sharpness, emotional maturity, and financial understanding. Your family can't touch this inheritance through legal manipulation, no matter what kind of case they try to build. But they think I'm brain damaged, I whispered, the full scope of their betrayal hitting me again. Are you? I met his eyes directly for the first time since the accident. Not even a little bit. He smiled, the first genuine warm smile I'd seen in days. I thought so. Your grandmother said you were the smartest and most perceptive person in the family, with better instincts than people twice your age. What do you want to do about this situation? That night, alone in my hospital room with machines beeping softly around me, I made my decision. I'd continue the charade just long enough to hear everything they were planning in complete detail. Then I'd make them pay for their betrayal in the most devastating way possible. The next day, Trevor arrived with legal documents he'd obviously printed from some sketchy online legal website. The papers looked official enough to fool someone who was actually confused, but I could see they were basic conservatorship forms that would give him complete control over my finances and legal decisions. These will help protect you and your future, he said, pointing to signature lines with an expensive pen. Just some simple paperwork that lets the family help manage complicated things while you recover your full mental capacity. I pretended to read the documents with great difficulty, moving my lips slightly and looking completely overwhelmed by the legal language and technical terms. I trust you completely, I said finally, picking up the pen with a visibly shaking hand. Mom practically held her breath. Dad moved closer, ready to witness my signature. Trevor's eyes gleamed with premature victory. Then I set the pen down carefully on the bedside table. But maybe I should wait until my head feels clearer, and I can understand everything better. What if I'm making a terrible mistake? Trevor's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The estate lawyer said time-sensitive matters shouldn't wait too long. There are strict deadlines and serious tax implications if we miss certain filing dates. Which lawyer exactly? I asked with innocent confusion. The one we hired specifically to help you navigate all this complicated legal stuff, Dad said smoothly, his lie flowing effortlessly. I'd never met this mysterious lawyer, of course. They were trying to rush me into signing away my rights to some stranger they'd probably found in a phone book or online advertisement. I'm so scared, I said, my voice breaking convincingly. What if I sign something wrong? What if I make a choice that somehow hurts our family financially? That's exactly why you need us to help guide you through this, Mom said, taking my hand in both of hers. We love you more than anything. We'll never let anything bad happen to you. The crushing irony was suffocating. They were literally planning to rob me blind while claiming to protect me from harm. That afternoon, while they thought I was napping peacefully, I heard them arguing in increasingly heated whispers outside my room. She's not signing anything, Trevor hissed, frustration clear in his voice. We need to push much harder or find a completely different approach. If we're too aggressive about it, that Peterson lawyer will definitely get suspicious, Dad warned. He's already asking too many probing questions about our motivations. Then what's our alternative? Mom asked anxiously. Just sit around waiting indefinitely while she recovers and realizes exactly what she's inheriting? Maybe she won't recover, Trevor said, his tone turning dark and genuinely dangerous. Head injuries are notoriously unpredictable. Sometimes people never get back to their baseline cognitive function. The way he said it made my skin crawl with terror. There was something calculating and cold in his voice, something that went far beyond hoping for my natural confusion to continue indefinitely. What exactly are you suggesting? Dad's voice was barely audible. I'm suggesting we stop waiting passively for nature to take its course and start helping it along in the right direction, Trevor replied ominously. Silence stretched between them, heavy with terrifying implications. Trevor, that's... Mom started, but her voice trailed off uncertainly. That's what? He cut her off sharply. Smart? Necessary? Practical? She's standing directly between us and over $1 million. Do you want to go back to living paycheck to paycheck while she buys designer clothes and travels around the world? She's your sister, Mom whispered, but even she sounded uncertain and conflicted. She's a spoiled brat who never appreciated anything she had, Trevor snapped viciously. Grandma Ruth turned her into a precious little princess while the rest of us struggled financially. Well, now it's our turn to benefit. But if something actually happened to her... Dad's voice was troubled but not horrified. Accidents happen all the time in hospitals, Trevor said with chilling coldness. Medication errors, equipment malfunctions, unexpected complications from head injuries. Very tragic. But these things occur regularly. The insurance money from her accident would be quite significant too, Mom added quietly, and my blood turned to absolute ice. They were discussing my death like a routine business transaction. Exactly right, Trevor said approvingly. Plus, if she dies before signing any inheritance papers, the estate automatically goes to the next of kin according to standard state law, which would be us. Dad concluded with satisfaction. The nurse rotation changes at midnight, Trevor continued, his voice dropping to barely a whisper. There's usually a significant gap between rounds around 2 a.m., more than enough time to ensure her condition takes a sudden turn for the worse. I lay frozen in my bed, every muscle tensed with absolute terror. They weren't just planning to steal from me anymore. They were actively discussing murdering me for insurance money and inheritance rights. What about all the monitoring equipment? Mom asked, and I realized with horror that she was fully on board with their murder plan. I've been carefully watching the patterns for days, Trevor said with obvious pride. Temporary disconnections happen constantly. Patients moving around, loose connections, equipment malfunctions. By the time anyone responds to the alarms, it would be far too late to save her. And her existing condition would make it look completely natural, Dad added thoughtfully. Head injury victims can deteriorate suddenly without warning. Exactly. Very sad, very believable, very convenient for everyone involved. My heart was pounding so violently I was terrified they could hear it through the walls. I had to escape before 2 a.m., but how could I get away without revealing that I'd been conscious and listening to every word they'd said? They talked for another 20 minutes, refining their horrible plan with business-like efficiency. Trevor would handle the technical aspects. He'd been researching which medications could cause cardiac arrest when administered incorrectly. Mom would create a distraction to ensure the nurses were occupied elsewhere during the critical time window. Dad would establish a perfect alibi by being visibly present in the family waiting area when the tragedy occurred. Tomorrow night, Trevor said finally with cold determination. We'll do it tomorrow night. That gives us exactly enough time to prepare properly and ensures we're not rushing anything important. After they finally left, I lay in the darkness with my mind racing between terror and desperate planning. I had less than 24 hours to figure out how to save my own life without exposing that I'd been listening to every detail of their murder plot. Around 11 p.m., when the hospital grew quiet and the overnight nurses settled into their predictable routines, I carefully removed my monitoring devices one by one and slipped out of bed. I'd been secretly practicing moving normally when no one was watching, so I knew I could walk without the confusion and weakness I'd been displaying during the day. I found a phone at the nurse's station and called Mr. Peterson's emergency line with trembling fingers. I need help immediately, I whispered, my voice shaking with genuine terror. They're planning to murder me tomorrow night. What? Cassie, is that you? Where are you calling from? I'm at the hospital, but they think I'm unconscious. They've been planning to steal my inheritance, but now they want to kill me for the insurance money too. I'm calling the police right now, he said, his voice sharp with alarm. Can you get somewhere safe until they arrive? I think so, but Mr. Peterson, I need you to know that I've been awake this whole time. I heard every single conversation they had. I've been pretending to be confused because I wanted to know exactly what they were really planning. Smart girl, he said with obvious pride. Your grandmother would be incredibly proud of your quick thinking. Stay exactly where you are while I conference in Detective Morrison. 20 minutes later, Mr. Peterson arrived at the hospital with Detective Morrison and 2 uniformed officers. I met them in a small conference room and told them absolutely everything. Every conversation I'd overheard, every detail of their inheritance theft plan, every horrifying aspect of their murder plot. We need you to wear a wire tomorrow, Detective Morrison said after I'd finished my detailed statement. If we can get them on record discussing their plans to kill you, we'll have everything we need for attempted murder charges. What if something goes wrong? I asked, my voice small with fear. What if they somehow realize I'm recording them? We'll have undercover officers positioned strategically throughout the hospital, she assured me firmly. At the very first sign of real danger, we'll move in immediately. The next day was the longest and most terrifying of my entire life. I had to continue my confused act while wearing recording equipment and knowing my family was planning to murder me that very night. Every time Trevor smiled at me, every time Mom stroked my hair, every time Dad patted my shoulder affectionately, I wanted to scream in terror and rage. Around 8 p.m., they gathered in my room for what they clearly expected to be our final conversation together. How are you feeling tonight, sweetheart? Mom asked, her voice sickeningly sweet and caring. Really tired, I said honestly. My head still hurts constantly. That's completely normal for head injuries, Trevor said reassuringly. Brain trauma takes time to heal properly. Sometimes things get worse before they get better. The way he emphasized worse made my skin crawl with revulsion. We've been thinking carefully about everything, Dad said, sitting down beside my bed with false tenderness. Maybe it would be much better if you didn't have to worry about all that complicated legal stuff with Grandma Ruth's estate. It's far too complex for someone recovering from serious brain trauma. We found an excellent lawyer who specializes in protecting vulnerable people who can't make important decisions for themselves, Mom added smoothly. He thinks we should definitely set up a special protective account where we can manage everything properly for you. That sounds so much easier, I said, my voice small and grateful. I really don't want to make any terrible mistakes with something so important. You won't have to worry about anything at all, Trevor said, and his smile was absolutely chilling. We'll take care of every single detail. They stayed until visiting hours ended at 9 p.m., each of them taking turns reassuring me that they'd handle all the complicated financial and legal details. Their performance was absolutely flawless. Loving family members protecting their vulnerable daughter and sister from harm. If I hadn't heard them planning my murder in cold blood, I might have actually believed they genuinely cared about my well-being. At 1:45 a.m., Trevor returned to my room wearing scrubs he'd obviously stolen from a supply closet. He moved with practiced quiet, clearly expecting me to be unconscious and helpless. The undercover officer posing as a night custodian was mopping floors nearby, ready to intervene if absolutely necessary. Cassie? Trevor whispered softly, approaching my bed like a predator. Are you awake? I kept my breathing steady and my eyes closed, fighting every instinct to run screaming. He began systematically disconnecting my monitoring equipment, just exactly as he described in his detailed plan. Then he pulled a syringe from his pocket. Whatever he intended to inject me with would look like a natural complication from my head injury. I'm genuinely sorry it has to be this way, he whispered. And for just a moment, he almost sounded truly sad. But you never really appreciated what you had anyway. As he reached for my IV line with the deadly syringe, Detective Morrison and 3 officers burst through the door with weapons drawn. Police! Step away from the patient immediately! Trevor's face went through shock, absolute terror, and then pure rage in rapid succession. This isn't what it looks like, he said desperately, still holding the syringe that would have killed me. It looks exactly like attempted murder, Detective Morrison said coldly, which is precisely what we expected, since we have you on tape planning this for the last 2 days. They arrested him on the spot while he screamed about frame-ups and misunderstandings. Mom and Dad were picked up at home an hour later. The police had been monitoring them too, and they'd been discussing their alibis and celebration plans via text messages throughout the evening. The trial lasted 4 months and made national news as one of the most shocking cases of family betrayal in recent memory. The prosecution had absolutely overwhelming evidence. My secretly recorded conversations, the murder weapon Trevor had brought to my hospital room, extensive financial records showing they'd been systematically stealing from Grandma Ruth for years, and detailed testimony from Mr. Peterson about their attempts to manipulate my inheritance through legal fraud. The media dubbed it the inheritance murder plot and covered every day of testimony. Legal experts called it a textbook case of family greed gone murderous. Victim advocacy groups used it as an example of how financial abuse can escalate to violence. During the trial, even more disturbing details emerged. Prosecutors revealed that my family had been planning their theft for over 6 months before the accident. They'd consulted multiple lawyers about conservatorship procedures, researched my medical history for any signs of mental health issues they could exploit, and even considered creating fake evidence of drug use to support incompetency claims. Most shocking was the revelation that they'd taken out a life insurance policy on me just 2 weeks before the accident, listing themselves as beneficiaries. The timing was so suspicious that investigators initially suspected they'd somehow caused the crash, though they ultimately couldn't prove it. Trevor's internet search history painted a horrifying picture of premeditation. He'd researched everything from medications that cause heart failure, to how long before brain injury patients wake up, to legal requirements for conservatorship proceedings. The prosecution presented dozens of screenshots showing his methodical planning. The defense tried to argue that it was all theoretical research, that they never intended to actually harm me. But the recorded conversations and Trevor's attempt to inject me with a lethal dose of potassium chloride destroyed any credibility they might have had. I testified from behind a protective screen, my voice steady and clear as I recounted every conversation I'd overheard and every detail of their plan to kill me for money. When the prosecutor asked why I'd pretended to be confused for so long, I looked directly at my family through the courtroom glass partition, because I needed to know who they really were beneath the masks they wore, I said clearly. And they showed me exactly that. They revealed themselves to be thieves and would-be murderers who valued money more than my life. The defense attorney tried to discredit my testimony by arguing that someone with a head injury couldn't be a reliable witness. Mr. Peterson countered by playing Grandma Ruth's video testimony, recorded just weeks before her death, in which she praised my intelligence and maturity while expressing concerns about my family's financial motives. "Cassie is the brightest young woman I've ever known," Grandma Ruth said from beyond the grave. "If she says something happened, you can believe every word. She notices things other people miss and has better judgment than most adults." The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Trevor was convicted of attempted first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, elder financial abuse, and fraud. He received 15 years to life. Mom and Dad were convicted of conspiracy to commit murder, elder abuse for systematically stealing from Grandma Ruth, attempted fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud. They each received 8 to 12 years in state prison. The judge called it one of the most disturbing and heartbreaking cases of family betrayal he'd encountered in 30 years on the bench. He specifically noted that the level of planning and premeditation made their crimes particularly heinous. The defendants attempted to murder their own daughter and sister for financial gain, Judge Martinez said during sentencing. "This represents a level of moral bankruptcy that shocks the conscience of this court. The inheritance was released to me immediately after the trial concluded. I used a substantial portion to finish college completely debt-free and establish a nonprofit organization specifically helping family violence victims and financial abuse survivors. I invested the rest exactly as Grandma Ruth had taught me during our precious weekend coffee dates. Diversified, conservative, focused on long-term growth rather than quick gains. The nonprofit, which I named the Ruth Foundation for Family Safety, grew rapidly. Within 2 years, we were operating shelters in 3 states and providing legal assistance to hundreds of victims annually. My story became part of our awareness campaigns, showing how financial abuse can escalate to life-threatening violence. I spoke at conferences across the country, sharing my experience and teaching others to recognize the warning signs of family financial manipulation. Law enforcement agencies invited me to train officers on inheritance-related crimes. Medical professionals learned how to identify patients who might be vulnerable to family exploitation. The media attention was overwhelming at first. I did interviews with major news outlets, appeared on true crime podcasts, and even consulted on a documentary about family betrayal. Every story emphasized the same message: trust your instincts, protect your assets, and remember that blood relation doesn't guarantee loyalty. I kept the Victorian house on Maple Street and turned Grandma Ruth's old sewing room into a comfortable office where I work as a full-time victim advocate. Every morning, I sit in the same rocking chair where she used to tell me stories about standing up for yourself, trusting your instincts, and never letting people take advantage of your kindness. She'd been absolutely right about everything, including my family's true nature hidden beneath their loving facade. 3 years after the trial, Trevor was stabbed by another inmate during a prison riot and spent 2 months in the prison hospital fighting for his life. Mom wrote me a heartbreaking letter asking if I'd visit him, claiming he'd found religion behind bars and desperately wanted to apologize for his actions. I never responded to her letter. Some bridges once burned should stay destroyed. My Aunt Rita, Mom's sister who lived across the country, reached out after seeing news coverage of the trial. She shared stories I'd never heard about my family's financial problems, their jealousy of Grandma Ruth's success, and their history of manipulating elderly relatives for money. "Your grandmother called me the week before she died," Rita told me during a long phone conversation. "She was worried about your parents' behavior and wanted someone else in the family to know about her will. She said she was afraid they might try to contest it or pressure you into sharing. Why didn't you warn me?" I asked. "She made me promise not to interfere unless you contacted me first," Rita explained. "She wanted you to figure things out on your own, to see their true nature without outside influence. She said it would make you stronger. Even from the grave, Grandma Ruth had been protecting me and teaching me valuable lessons." Rita became my closest family connection, visiting regularly and sharing stories about our family history that my parents had never told me. She explained how my grandfather had built the family business from nothing, how Dad had slowly destroyed it through poor decisions and risky investments, how Mom had always resented her mother-in-law's financial independence. "They used to complain constantly about how Ruth spoiled you," Rita said. "They thought she should be helping them, instead of spending money on your education and activities." Last month, Dad was released on parole after serving his minimum sentence for good behavior. He showed up at my victim advocacy office, gray-haired and hollow-eyed, begging desperately for forgiveness and claiming he'd learned from his mistakes. "You completely destroyed our entire family," he said, tears streaming down his weathered face. We made some terrible mistakes, but we never would have actually gone through with it. Trevor was just upset and talking crazy because he was scared about money. I looked at him calmly from behind my desk, surrounded by awards from victim advocacy organizations and photos from college graduation. You brought a syringe full of poison to my hospital room at 2 a.m. with the specific intention of murdering me. That wasn't crazy talk or empty threats. That was attempted murder, and only police intervention saved my life. But we're still family, he pleaded desperately. Blood is thicker than water. Your grandmother would want us to forgive each other and move forward together. Grandma Ruth left me that inheritance specifically because she knew exactly what kind of people you were, I replied firmly. She saw your true nature and your greed long before I did. She was protecting me from you. He tried to grab my hands across the desk, his desperation palpable. You can't live your whole life holding grudges against family. Bitterness and anger will destroy you from the inside. I'm not bitter or angry, I said, standing up and walking calmly to the door. I'm protected and educated about the reality of toxic relationships. There's a crucial difference. As building security escorted him from the premises, he turned back one final time. You'll regret this decision someday, he called out, his voice breaking with emotion. Family is everything in this world. When you're old and alone, you'll wish you had forgiven us. I closed the door firmly and locked it behind me. He was completely wrong about family being everything. Family isn't about blood relations or automatic obligations or forgiveness without genuine accountability. Real family is about mutual love and protection and putting each other's well-being above personal gain. I'd rather be completely alone than surrounded by people who'd murder me for insurance money. And I'm not alone anyway. I have chosen family now. People who love me for who I am as a person, not what I'm worth financially. People who celebrate my successes instead of plotting to steal them. People who would protect me from harm instead of causing it. My chosen family includes Mr. Peterson, who became like a grandfather to me, Detective Morrison, who still checks in regularly, Rita, who fills the mother role my biological mother never deserved, and dozens of other survivors I've met through my advocacy work. Every Sunday, I visit Grandma Ruth's grave and tell her about my week in detail. I update her on the nonprofit's progress, share funny stories from my advocacy work, and thank her repeatedly for teaching me to trust my instincts and protect myself from predators, even when those predators share your DNA. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't pretended to be unconscious that first day. Would they have found another way to steal from me eventually? Would they have escalated to murder anyway when legal manipulation failed? I'll never know for sure. But I'm eternally grateful I learned the truth when I did, because sometimes the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally can be the most dangerous enemies you'll ever face. And sometimes the only way to survive your own family is to expose them completely for who they really are, underneath their masks of love and concern. The Ruth Foundation continues growing every year, helping more families recognize and escape financial abuse before it escalates to violence. My story has become a cautionary tale, a training tool, and hopefully a source of hope for others facing similar betrayals. Grandma Ruth's legacy lives on, not just in the money she left me, but in the wisdom she shared and the protection she provided even after her death. She taught me that real love means wanting someone to be safe and successful, not wanting to control or exploit them. That's the kind of family worth building, the kind of love worth trusting, and the kind of legacy worth passing on.